Hey guys, it's Alex with Paragon Performance. Today we're going to be showing you how to do the stage 1 lowering on your C8 Z06 with front lift. We're going to be doing that using our newly designed front lift collars for the Z06, guaranteeing you that 3/4 inch drop in the front, as well as it's an OEM like finish. And then we're going to show you how to turn down the rear suspension as well to match the same 3/4 inch amount that we lowered the front. Let's get to this install. All right, so we're going to start here by opening our frunk. And then we will need to remove these two plastic trim panels on both sides, as well as this one in the center. These just pull out. I'm going to pull up on the corners here to release the tabs. And there's one here in the center. Now we've got that off, we're going to get to the top of our strut back here and get the bolts and the connector unplugged from it. All right, so we're going to start here with the connector. We're going to remove it from where it's attached to the strut here. And we need to release this red tab by pulling it back and unplug it. We're going to remove the 3 13mm nuts. All right, now raise and support your vehicle. All right, so this car does have the carbon ceramic option for the brakes. So we are going to use the factory supplied foam rings that will go around the outside of the rotor, as well as the Paragon Performance wheel hangers, just to help prevent the wheel from chipping that rotor. Before we remove the strut out of the vehicle, we're going to start here by disconnecting the sensor from the front lift assembly, as well as unbolting the hose for the front lift assembly. So we're going to pull the safety tab down and then depress and unplug, and then tuck that out of the way. Then using an 11mm socket, we're going to take this banjo bolt out. It will leak a little bit of fluid, so put a drain pan underneath it. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this bolt out of the bottom of the strut. It is a 21mm on both sides, so you'll need a wrench to hold the nut on the other side, and then we'll remove this bolt out. Now that we have that bolt out, you're going to want to rotate the wheel so that way it opens up more space in this area for us, getting the caliper out away from it. And we need to pull it off the control arm. We will need to rotate the bottom of the strut just a little bit, and it'll come out and then down. Sometimes you may have to push down on the spindle assembly a little bit with some body weight. Then we need to rotate the bottom of the shock, and that will allow us to slip it out and straight down, watching the electrical connector that sits on the top of the strut to make sure we don't snag it on anything. Now that we've got our strut assembly out here, we're going to start dismantling this so we can install our collar. We're going to start here. We need to depin this connector so we'll be able to remove the top hat over the top of it. So we're going to start by doing that. All right, so the first thing we need to do in getting this depin is we need to remove this clamshell off the back of here. Just using a small flathead screwdriver, you can kind of wedge it in here and release the clips that allow us to open this. Sometimes they can be a little difficult, and having a second screwdriver is sometimes necessary. So. All right, now we're going to remove the terminals out of this connector, keep track of which wire came out of which hole, and then holding the clip like so, we're going to take our tool. It has a little bent end on it here that needs to point towards my thumb, and then we're going to insert this inside. It's going to be a little difficult to see what I'm doing, but it goes inside through a slot inside a purple clip inside. We're going to basically put it in there and then kind of push back, and then grab our wire and gently pull it out the back. The same thing with the other terminal. Okay, set that aside. Now there's a rubber boot here on the top of the strut. We're going to pull that off of here. All right, so next we need to get this disassembled, removing the nut here on the center of the shock to remove the top hat and spring assemblies. You don't need to use the spring compressor with these, as they have a helper spring and you can actually compress this spring by hand. However, if you're uncomfortable with it, you can use a spring compressor on it. Just keep in mind that this spring is pretty long and you're gonna have to compress that a lot. I find it easier just to do it by hand. So first thing we're gonna do is get this nut broke free. Then we're gonna hold this down and just loosen the bolt real slow. Okay, we got our nut free. Now we're just gonna let that helper spring extend. Collect the nut. And we're just going to dismantle this. Keep track of the orientation of how the springs sit in here, how this spacer plate sits in there, as well as how the dust boot sets into the bottom of the top hat here. We're going to remove our bump stop. Then we're going to remove our spacer and primary spring. Next, we need to remove this cap here on the top. The Z06 does have stickers here, so keep in mind there will be some resistance going through the stickers to do this. You can peel them off if you would like. We're just going to use the front lift assembly as kind of a slide hammer and knock it off. Remove the front lift assembly. Then we're going to remove the factory collar. Now we're going to install the Paragon collar. Just like so. Then we're going to repeat the same process, but in reverse of putting it back together here. Hopefully you kept track of the orientation of how you took everything apart. You can mark it if you needed to. These are a lot more forgiving than the Stingray was, as meaning that when you put it back in, you can reclock everything pretty easily. So, okay, so you're going to reinstall the top plate here using a small dead blow, and you just kind of tap it back on there. Okay. Reinstall the primary spring. Install the bump stop. We're going to install our help spring and dust boot. Okay. Now we're going to put our top plate on. We're going to feed the wires back through the center hole. We're going to fish our nut back on. Then we're going to take and line the shock up with the top of the strut here. And then depress the helper spring. Sometimes this is easier when you get a second person to help you. And start this nut. And now we're going to tighten that down. All right, so we're going to reassemble our connector. installing the rubber boot first. Install our connector, making sure these are in the same orientation as what you took them out. Make sure they click into place, and then always double check that they seated correctly. Now we're going to reinstall the clamshell. Just like that, we've got it installed. All right, so we're going to get the strut reinstalled. We do have to keep in mind this alignment dowel that's here will fit into a specific hole up here. And then we need to make sure that the wire gets shoved up through the center here. We're going to rotate the bottom back in place. And then we're going to get this bolt reinstalled here on the bottom. All right, so now we're going to take our front lift assembly here. We're going to straighten it back up. All right, before we get the hose and connector installed, we're going to unbolt this 10mm bolt. We're going to install a small aluminum spacer in between it and the body. We're going to pull this out off the subframe, and we're going to install this in behind and then reinstall the bolt. All right, so now we're going to reinstall the hose. All right, replug in our connector. So we've got that strut mostly installed here. We still need to tighten and torque the 3 nuts here on the top of the strut, as well as plug in the electrical connector and put that back in its place as well. Then we're going to repeat the exact same process for the other side. All right, so we've got the front all lowered now. We're going to move on here to the rear. If you have the carbon ceramic brake option, same process as the front. Install the foam rings. We're going to use the wheel hangers as well. Let's get the wheel off. We'll show you how to lower the rear. All right, first we're going to need to remove this piece of electrical tape. Couple screwdrivers, gently pry this off of this lower collar, and then we'll get to lowering the rear. And using a set of our Paragon coilover wrenches, you can also get these in Corvette branded one as well. We are going to break these two apart. We're going to turn this smaller one down till there's just a single thread showing here, and then we will use the bigger wrench and turn this down to meet it, and then we need to lock them back together. That'll get us our 3/4 of an inch in the rear. We're going to hook the smaller one towards your left side, the bigger one towards your right. You can just give this a couple good whacks with your hand. Sometimes you got to be a little more firm with it, but we can break that bottom one free. Like I said, we're just going to turn that down. And you just want to see that last thread. Now with using the bigger wrench, we're going to hold the bottom of this collar and just twist it down. Okay. And flipping the direction of our wrenches here, we are going to tighten it down, or lock the two together. Okay, and then reinstall your plastic sleeve. Now we just need to repeat that same process for the other side. there you guys have it. Pretty simple install. Get your C8 Z06 ride height looking proper. These darn C8s and their monster truck ride height. Wheel hangers, wrenches, the front collar kit, all available on paragonperf.com. Links in the description. As always, like, subscribe, and comment. We'll see you guys next time.